welcome to episode 282 of the Daily Fantasy Edge. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the analysts here at DraftKings. I'm the father of the most beautiful beast in the world, Jerry, and we are coming off of a standard week. I say that because things went mostly as expected. Kyle Allen set up at 4K against the Cardinals went as expected. Denny Dimes repping team preseason, igniting Evan Ingram as expected. The shower narrative failing miserably as expected. Keenan Allen crushing, Arizona disappointing people, me doing well in cash and getting trucked in the lotteries, aka tournaments. It all makes sense. Really the most disappointing part of the week for me, and I'm sure a lot of you, was the Chris Carson situation because, I was all set to jam in 3 of Eckler, Dalvin, McCaffrey, and Zeke, and of course play Keenan Allen also, and then punt it off everywhere else. But then, of course, Rashad Penny has to pull his goddamn hamstring during a walkthrough on Friday. And then the Saints have to score 2 defensive/special teams touchdowns in the first quarter and a half. And then, of course, Chris Carson has to fumble for the 4th time in 3 games. I mean, just a disaster. I don't think that Carson was a bad play by any means. In fact, I think he was probably a really good play, and I would likely make it again. But man, what a run out for Chris Carson. I mean, just starting from Saturday, starting really from the walkthrough on Friday all the way through. What a mess. Of course, cash games didn't really come down to Carson too much because he was extremely popular. 44% owned in the $100 single entry double up on DraftKings, but only 29% in the $5. And I guess that's something to note, lower stakes, larger field, softer opponents, and they get rewarded there, right? Like people who didn't get on Chris Carson, which I think was right, got rewarded. But then again, Keenan Allen, who I thought was just a stone lock, somehow only 24% in the $5 double up and a little bit higher, 34% owned in the $100 double up. In terms of other late news, the Patriots thing was obviously big. And, James White is clearly not a client of Gender Labs LLC, your one-stop shop for all things conception, gender optimization, timing tells, positional analysis, and more. Because if he was one of our clients, he would not be having a freaking baby on Sunday of week 3. And man, what a mess this turned into because it was already late when we got this news. It was like 10 a.m., 9:30 a.m. on Sunday. And of course, I knew that Rex Burkhead was a really good play. If it didn't cross your mind how good of a play Rex Burkhead was, I think you need to reevaluate your Sunday morning process because we've seen no evidence whatsoever, other than stupid beat writer speculation that Sony Michel will be used in the pass game. And we also have no evidence that the Patriots trusted Damian Harris to be out there with Tom Brady at all. So yeah, in other weeks or in weeks when we didn't have Chris Carson for value, or in weeks where we didn't have Dalvin and Zeke and Eckler and CMC in such amazing spots, then Rex would have been a no-brainer at 3,900, I think, taking all of that pass game role plus his rushing role in a full PPR setting against the Jets. I know a lot of people got on Edelman after the James White news, and that for sure made sense. I didn't really make any moves to Julian Edelman. I definitely ran hot there because, he was smashing at the time of his injury, and I don't know how much more he would have gotten in the second half. They were already blowing them out, but, unlucky for people who got on Edelman probably sharply that he got hurt there late in the second quarter. So anyways, one thing that happened to me this week, which has happened so often in my quote unquote career, is I smash in cash and just totally airball on GPPs. And after doing really well in GPPs the first couple weeks, this week I had 8 lineups and I think only 1 or 2 cash, and they were both really small min cashes. And I certainly have some regrets looking back, examining the teams that I put in. I've been trying to get the idea of hedging through GPPs out of my head completely. And what I mean by that is, I end up with a Kia or whatever on Nelson Aguilar in cash, right? And then the natural way in my stupid head to hedge that is to play 0 of him in GPPs. And I used to really think that was right. Like a really good way to hedge. And honestly, maybe it is, but it just sets up these scenarios where in weeks that I'm on it right in cash, I just totally brick out in GPPs. Um, so all the spots, and there were a lot of them when I was making GPP lineups, all the spots where I was like, man, this team could really use a sub 4K wide receiver. I went James Washington or Devin Smith or Arcega Whiteside or Philip Dorsett, which worked out, but whatever. Guys like that, Demir Bird. Whereas if I would have just taken the higher equity, if I would have been like, I better have a couple Nelson Aguilar teams here just to be even with the field or whatever, it obviously would have worked out way better. And also, I only played Keenan Allen on, I think, 2 of my 8 GPP teams. And if I had only played GPPs, right? Like if I had not played cash at all, I probably would have played Keenan on like 5 or 6, but I have this thought in my head about hedging through GPPs. So yeah, I think I did well with stacks, and I was on a lot of stuff in tournaments that was the right stuff. I had Matt Ryan, Julio Jones stack. I had Danny Dimes. I had Jameis. I had Mahomes. I had Dak Amari. But without Aguilar or much Keenan, I was just drawing dead in tournaments because they were so owned and played so well at their salaries. So I'm going to try to stop doing that, hedging through GPPs. Anyways, let's get to the 4-man, and it was won by Al. Thankfully breaking the listener's winning streak. Big differentiator for Al's lineup was Greg Olsen, only one to play him as he went for the Ertz fade. We know when Al gets on a defensive flow chart, he's not going to get off it, and it certainly paid off here. 6 catches, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns for Greg Olsen. I would note that all 3 of Peter Allen and I played Kyle Allen. All 3 of us played Keenan Allen. All 3 of us played Chris Carson. All 3 of us played Chargers D. Second side ended up being significantly better, like 16 points, because Dalvin went off and Patriots D played reasonably. But anyways, my original point was that, Al and Peter and I didn't talk after the show on Wednesday. We still landed on pretty much the same construction. I think that was right. All right, the Listener League. It did fill in week 3. It was only, quote unquote, only 8K entries, but still pretty sweet. It's 8K entries again in week 4, and it is already open for registration. You get on DK Playbook, you find the logo for this podcast. The link is on that page. It's not hard. I'm done with this bit about people, trying to find the Listener League, whatever. It's not that hard. 8,000 people found it by early Sunday morning in week 3. So yeah, get in there. Remains rake free. Remains a 3-entry max. Remains a $10 buy-in. 8K entries. The week 3 Listener League was won by Talon Bray, and he played Kyle Allen at 15% owned, which was way higher owned than what he was in other tournaments, because you guys are sharp. Christian McCaffrey 33%. Greg Olsen 13%. I've talked so much about, I feel like already this season, going back to before the season, about why quarterbacks and offenses against the Cardinals are in such good spots. The Cardinals offense is so inefficient. They play so fast. The other team runs so many plays. And then you have a really bad defense without Patrick Peterson on the other side. It's like really hard for opposing offenses to fail. So yeah, Kyle Allen, CMC, Olsen, great stack there. Obviously to win, you had to have both Mike Evans, who was just like one of the most obvious buy low guys, in higher stake stuff, or even in like average stake stuff. Mike Evans was significantly more owned than Chris Godwin. And I saw that coming just because the field is getting better. I mean, the field realizes that just because Chris Godwin has outscored Mike Evans the previous 2 weeks, that it doesn't mean Chris Godwin's going to keep outscoring Mike Evans. And I do think that by the end of the year, they'll be really close. But yeah, I mean, people are on it. So yeah, he had both Mike Evans and Keenan Allen. He had the Aguilar chalk. He actually played Mark Andrews in the flex, which I didn't love. I did not like this spot for Mark Andrews at all, especially because I thought he was truly questionable with the injury. And yeah, I think people just go into Arrowhead and struggle a lot. He had Patriots D. He was actually, he only had one player, Talon Bray did. He only had one player in his whole lineup under 12% owned, and that was Alvin Kamara. So yeah, not a very contrarian lineup, and sometimes that can work out. In second place was Zolds. This was the one that I thought, along with the Kyle Allen stacks, I thought this one really made sense for tournaments. He had Jameis, Mike Evans, and then he brought it back with Sterling Shepard. Like all those kind of stacks, Jameis Evans, Godwin, Sterling, Ingram, Barkley, like all that stuff made sense. And he actually had OJ Howard in here as well, who didn't play well. I think, played reasonably, but didn't play well. But he made up for it with Marvin Jones Jr. at 1.9% and Tony Pollard. This one, man, Tony Pollard at 0.04%. I mean, I guess if you projected the Cowboys to blow out the Dolphins, then you could project Tony Pollard for, whatever he got, 12 or 13 touches. But yeah, I mean, Tony Pollard, pretty thin, but YOLO. And then he had Christian McCaffrey, obviously. In third place was A Markowitz 6. See him tweeting at me, grinding hard, establishing the run. Love to see it. Congrats to A Markowitz 6. He had Russ Wilson at 0.9% and Tyler Lockett at 1.9%. And this is what I mean by, we talk a lot about people bragging about finding these really off the wall plays that are 1% or 0.5% and they think they're so sharp. You can find actually good players in good spots who are 0.9% and 1.9%, like Russ Wilson and Tyler Lockett. Like, I mean, these guys are so talented. The target tree is so narrow. So yeah, great play there by A. Markowitz. Philip Dorsett, 4.5% owned. And, we've talked plenty, and I think it's gone underrated how without Gronk, without any viable tight end, how viable the secondary wide receivers are for the Patriots. And Philip Dorsett, I mean, Tom Brady loves throwing the ball. He's been so efficient on his targets, so I like that play. Mark Ingram at 2.2%. Yeah, I mean, he's clearly a threat to score a lot of touchdowns. And I didn't love Mark Ingram because I thought they would get behind. But yeah, you would note that Justice Hill didn't even, barely even played. I actually didn't check the snaps on that, but I believe Justice Hill barely even played, even though the Ravens were getting trucked for most of the game. Actually, in eighth place, I know I don't normally talk about the eighth place team, but got a note from his buddy. It was Steven Randazzo. Said he's been a longtime fan, really appreciated it. So wanted to shout out his eighth place finish. Played Danny Dimes, Sterling, Ingram, Mike Evans. So good. Dalvin, CMC. God, what a lineup. How does this lineup not win? But thanks for being a fan, Steven Randazzo. Appreciate it. All right, get into the Listener League this week. Fill it. Hashtag make it bigger. Now it is time to tell you guys about Upstart. As most of us have found out the hard way, getting into debt is easy. Getting out is hard, especially if your credit score isn't great. Thankfully now there's Upstart.com, the revolutionary lending platform that knows you're more than just your credit score and offers smarter interest rates to help you pay off high interest credit card debt. Upstart goes beyond the traditional credit score when assessing your credit worthiness. They actually reward you on your education and job history in the form of a smaller interest rate. Upstart believes you're more than just your credit score. They believe in you and they understand that. They make it fast, simple, and easy to check your rate in just a few minutes. The best part, once the loan is approved and accepted, most people get their funds the very next business day. Over 300,000 people have used Upstart to pay off credit cards or meet their financial goals. Free yourself from the burden of high interest credit card debt by consolidating everything into one monthly payment with Upstart. See why Upstart is ranked number one in their category with over 300 businesses on Trustpilot, and hurry to upstart.com/edge to find out how low your Upstart rate is. Checking your rate only takes a few minutes and will not affect your credit. That's upstart.com/edge. All right, now it is time to get into some listener questions. Producer Luke, hit the theme music. All right, question one. And by the way, we got an insane amount of really funny, really good questions this week. I saved some of them. We'll try to do them next week. Question one comes from Kyle Arnold. It says, my friends and family know that I'm a fairly successful DFS player. Every Sunday morning, I get text messages with people asking me who to start and who to sit. Called a dud this weekend by telling someone to play Carson over LaShawn McCoy. How do you avoid these unfair and awkward interactions? Well, first of all, nice little humble brag that Kyle snuck in there. Shout out to you. But yeah, I deal with this a lot, of course, and I know people don't want to hear it, but there is nothing more mind-numbing than a start-sit question for a season-long team. Like, And I'm well aware that's what's on the mind of like 95% of season long fantasy players. They think it's like this monumental decision. And of course, after the games are over, there will be a clear right and wrong decision. But the thing that people I somehow don't understand is that before the game, these start to sit decisions that they're asking about are mostly, around 50-50 from a probability standpoint. And yeah, if you're a donkey or whatever, maybe you take the worst of it. Maybe you get it in 40-60 or 45-55 against. But in a one game sample of a football game, these 55-45 equity spots are like so random. And I'm following this stuff like as close as anyone, right? I spend literally like 70 plus hours a week on it. And I definitely don't have the right answer when it comes to start sit decisions. Yeah, if you're asking, chances are it's so close that it's, basically a coin flip, and anything around the coin flip is going to be so much random variance around it. Question 2 comes from Enos Janya. He says, would your wife and kids leave you if they found out that you played 2 cash lineups? Yeah, that's a good one, Enos. Well played. My wife would probably be happy if she found out about the humiliating 2 cash lineup week. She knows I'm less likely to get dusted if I do that. I think obviously you get to a point in gambling of any form, poker, DFS, whatever, where the losses hurt a lot more than the wins are good. And I think anyone who has been doing this a long time feels that way. And to be honest, at this point in my life, I've actually turned 37 today. Shout out to me. But I should probably be a bit more aware of downside. Like when I was younger, I remember my friends would make fun of me for bankroll management or whatever because I would play, 510 NL with like 8K to my name or 10K to my name or whatever. And I think that was fine then, but it's just different now, where the downside is just sharper and yeah, the wins just don't mean as much in terms of life or whatever. Question 3 comes from Jan Yankovic. He says, when is there going to be a DFS movie like Rounders? And who would you want to play you? Which DFS characters would be you most interested in seeing on the big screen? Yeah, I don't think there will be a movie like Rounders about DFS because Rounders was focused on the players and the underground scene. And that's really compelling stuff, right? There's nothing compelling about watching someone grind spreadsheets and formulas and sit at a computer all day, right? Like they're not going to make a Rounders 2 and just film a guy, doing solver stuff all day. However, I do think that one day there will be a movie about the DFS industry and everything that happened behind the scenes, like going from this outcast kind of niche industry, barely legal, to almost getting shut down, to literally paving the way for legalized sports betting in our country. That's a really compelling story and one that should definitely be a movie. And there are already books out about it. Friend of the show, Dan Barbarisi, wrote a really good one a couple years ago called Dueling with Kings. I read that, was awesome. I know Albert Chen, the Sports Illustrated writer, just put out a book about daily fantasy industry called $1 Billion Fantasy. I haven't had a chance to read that yet, but I will. So yeah, like I wouldn't be in the movie, right? Like I'm not the interesting part of the story. The real story, what should be the movie, is everything that happened behind the scenes as DFS like literally changed the way we consume sports in America. So I think the movie would be cool. All right, question 4. One of the best friends of the show, the man's Peter Overzet. He says, is it time to abandon WeWork? Stolen mics, human interaction, tough scene. Yeah, so I was getting ready to do the live stream on Sunday morning and I opened the drawer in my WeWork desk and my mic is just gone. I mean, ridiculous, right? I've been there like 3 or 4 years and I've never had anything like this. But what's weird is like there are tons of computers there. Everyone leaves all their equipment out. People have cameras and sweet monitors and everything. It seems weird someone would just like come in there and steal my mic. So I guess it's possible that I had left it in the recording, in the room that I record in the previous Sunday, just forgot about it. Definitely possible, probably likely. But anyways, no man's, it is not a time to abandon or even disparage WeWork. It's still the best place. It's truly my happy place. By the way, there's this absurd story out there about their founder, CEO, like they're about to IPO, and this dude has just gone bonkers or something wild. And I'm just, I'm hoping his antics don't affect me personally, because that's all that really matters. Question 5 comes from Adam Nessel. He says, your tone on sports betting took a complete 180. In past pods, you said it's nearly impossible to be a winner because of how efficient the market is, but now you make a couple references per week that you already had bets on a side. What changed, and is it treating you well? Oh yeah, so there's a big difference between having fun, betting on some games, and actually thinking you can win or trying to win. I've always bet sides, I mean, it's really fun. I'll throw a couple $100 here or there, no big deal. And the reason that it can be fun and not, you don't get completely buried, or you shouldn't get completely buried, is for the reasons that I said before. NFL lines, particularly later in the week, are so efficient that you really can't make a quote unquote bad bet. Like Jerry betting closing lines for an entire season would end up right at 50%. So yeah, I do like to see if I can bet early in the week and beat closing numbers, but it's just for fun. Like, I know I'm not winning. And like 99.5% of people out there who tell you they're winning betting on sports are just flat line. Or if they're betting NFL closing numbers, et cetera, like they're just lying. So yeah, of course, if you have that attitude that I just mentioned in DFS, well, I'll just show up on Sunday and I'll throw some players in a lineup and it's probably fine. No, it's not. You're drawing stone dead if you do that in DFS. It's just so much more work to compete and to win, which is why there are more paths to making money playing DFS, in my opinion, if you're willing to work. As a peer-to-peer game like DFS is, we can outwork, outsmart, out-strategize our opponents. Betting into NFL lines, you're betting into a market which is extremely efficient, and the top 0.1, top 0.5% of guys are moving the market and moving it towards efficiency as the week goes on. So yeah, I'm not betting on sports is fun, man. I mean, there's no doubt. And like I said, it's people like it because it's not a lot of work and you can never make that bad of a bet. Of course, if Jerry goes 50% for the season, depending on how much you bet, you're going to lose a lot because, raked at 10%. So question 6 comes from Tristan Braverman. It says, always hear guys claiming a single cash build with stone locks. Wondering how you determine the full-blown locks as opposed to ancillary pieces when there can be 10 guys at each position you love. So the whole idea is to narrow our pool down further than 10 guys. Like, if we love 10 guys at a position equally, we aren't digging deep enough. Early in the week, I kind of agree that there are typically a lot of guys that I like, but by the time Saturday night, Friday night comes, I usually narrow my cash build pretty tight, 3 or 4 running backs, 4 or 6 wide receivers, 1 to 3 quarterbacks. And then I figure out what fits best. So yeah, like Kyle Allen and Keenan and Ertz and Aguilar and Eckler were examples of guys I felt like were locks this week. Of course, I could end up being wrong, was wrong, but I have to develop a process where you think you're right to have that confidence. So yeah, I think, the more work you put in, Tristan, the more better process you develop, the more you'll feel like you have locks. Whether it works out or not, it's easy to call a guy a lock. That doesn't mean he's going to produce. It means before the game start, he's a lock. There's just like such a big difference there, obviously. If you're going to do hindsight analysis and say, well, Zach Ertz wasn't a lock because XYZ, that's usually incorrect. All right, last question we're going to do today comes from one of the best friends of the show, the Dink Piece, Drew Dinkmeyer. He says, I've got my pills. I've got my manscaping equipment. I've got my LinkedIn profile. What do I need next? Yeah, of course, Dink is referring to the recent ads that we've had on the show. Honestly, you have the 3 things you mentioned from our lovely sponsors. It's really all you need, man. You're ready to join the hashtag team, so congrats on the sex. Okay. That is going to do it for this solo pod. We'll be back Thursday with the 3-man with Al and Peter. Get in the listener league, fill it, hashtag make it bigger. For Jerry, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody. We are promoters at DraftKings and also avid fans. Our usernames are Adam Levitan, Al Smizzle, and CSU Ram 88. We may sometimes play on our personal accounts in the games that we offer advice on. Although we have expressed our personal view on the games and strategies in this podcast, they do not necessarily reflect the views of DraftKings, and we also may deploy different players and strategies than what we recommended in this podcast.